And because it's a path of transformation, it's not enough just to know it in our minds, intellectually, if you like. Following the Buddhist path actually means that we need to engage our emotions and our imagination. And so ritual is a way of directly engaging them both. So what's Buddhist ritual? Well, it usually consists of three main elements. Firstly, recitation. Secondly, chanting. And thirdly, offerings. So the verses that we recite, they're primarily associated with the principles of Buddhism, the aspirations of being a Buddhist, and the expressions of our spiritual aspiration, usually towards the goal, of course, to enlightenment. We often chant in either Pali or Sanskrit, which are the two ancient languages, Indian languages that have come down. And when we chant, and I hope we have an opportunity to explore that this evening, it's a way of forging an emotional connection with Buddhist ideals, as well as, of course, of being quite beautiful. Sometimes we chant mantras, or mantras can also be translated as mind protectors. So these are Sanskrit phrases which are believed to be the verbal expression of enlightenment. You may have come across the Tibetan mantra, Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum. You could roughly translate this as something like Om to the jewel in the lotus, Hum, something to do associated with the Bodhisattva of compassion, Avalokiteshvara. And actually by chanting such a beautiful mantra, sometimes we can just become very in touch with that expression of enlightenment, compassion, and even connect in our imagination to the Bodhisattva, Avalokiteshvara. So there's also offerings I mentioned. So traditionally there's three offerings. Flowers. So flowers symbolize, of course, both beauty, but of course flowers fade, they fall. So in a way, it's a deeper sense of beauty in the fact that they are impermanent. They're only with us for a short time, but whilst they're there, where they're blooming, we can enjoy. And when they fade away, it's a sign and a teaching in itself. Secondly, candles. On almost all Buddhist shrines, there'll be candles burning, symbolizing the radiance of enlightenment that, of course, is possible for each and every one of us. And finally, one may light incense. Having incense burning, it pervades the air, and it could be equated to the same fragrance, the same way a fragrance of the spiritual life pervades and spreads in all directions. So many forms of ritual have developed over the history of Buddhism. So sometimes it's just a simple recitation of a few verses, or often it can even lead to complex and lengthy ceremonies. Such practices are multifaceted, and they often involve simultaneous recitation of verses of worship, even physical activity, for example, bowing, and the conscious development of positive emotional states. We even then create mental visualizations of images, even visualizing sounds. And in this way, the idea is to bring a total harmony of body, speech, and mind. So without just concentrating on ritual itself, I'd like to explore also Buddhist shrines. So obviously we have a beautiful shrine that some of you have seen at the Buddhist Center. And of course, all this time, many of you may have created your own shrines at home. So I've created my own shrine at home, and we've got an image of it here. So it's the main focus for my practice. This is where I sit and meditate in front of. and it can be as beautiful or colourful or complex as you like. Or, of course, you could go for a more Zen-like approach, more ascetic, more sparse, maybe more Zen-like. So for me, the main elements of the shrine are, of course, the Buddha image. This Buddha image, for me, is absolutely beautiful. It's a representation of enlightenment. It's an image of the Buddha. On my shrine, it's the earth-touching Buddha. He's touching the earth. And it was actually brought to me as a thanks for my chairmanship at the Buddhist Centre when I handed over to Siddhanatha last year. And it was a beautiful gift. And yeah, it's lovely to sit in front of that shrine and meditate in front of it. There's flowers. So these can take the form of decorative arrangements of any natural materials, really. I mean, flowers, plants, leaves, and they obviously they signify this idea of impermanence as well as beauty. But I mean, I've seen some most beautiful shrines, thinking of our Buddha-filled retreat centres where shrines are so elaborate and so beautiful. Often the half the outside is brought in to celebrate and decorate. There's candles, so there's no limit to the amount of candles one can have. So it's something very beautiful, I find, especially in the evening, meditating at night, lighting candles. It just gives something quite profound, really. And from a Buddhist perspective, the idea of candles is also to reflect our own inner light and our own potential towards enlightenment. I've mentioned incense because they're an offering, but the combination of fire, candles and fragrance is such a beautiful one. We may also want to consider putting things like photographs of images of great teachers that are relevant to us, or perhaps there may be somebody we want to bring to mind. So we would put perhaps family or friends on our shrine. And, you know, for special circumstances, we may put them on temporarily for a particular ritual or practice. And sacred objects. So we can put all sorts of objects on our shrine. I have things like vajras and bells, and they're associated for me that have a special sense for me. But anything sacred or worthy of regard or reverence is something also worthwhile putting on one's shrine. And, you know, a shrine is a real focus. It's somewhere to come and to practice each day. And just by being in front of the shrine, I can feel quite meditative. So I do hope you consider making your own shrines if you haven't already done so. And certainly decorating them in a way that moves you. So I'm going to say a little bit more about emotion and the spiritual life now. And then we'll have an opportunity to actually practice some puja, a Buddhist ritual, afterwards. So I think there's probably a common misconception that Buddhism is purely an intellectual affair, kind of philosophy, even a philosophical discussion. And there's often a misunderstanding that Buddhism is concerned with overcoming the suffering caused by attachment. So it must be concerned with overcoming the emotions. So it's true that an over-identification with our emotional responses is unhelpful, particularly, of course, if the emotions are negative. However, it's difficult to achieve anything in life without a degree of emotional commitment. And of course, this is true of the Buddhist path. An engagement with Buddhism that doesn't involve emotions would just be an intellectual affair, which is fine if you're a scholar of Buddhism, perhaps doing a PhD in Buddhism, but for a practitioner seeking a path of transformation, it needs to engage a whole of our being, body, speech and mind, and ritual helps us to do this. So I've mentioned the word puja, which actually means worship, and this is a way, a Buddhist practice in terms of ritual. So we don't obviously regard the Buddha as a god. So worship here has a different flavour to worship in a Western context. So there's various pujas. In fact, there's new ones being written all the time. They often include the chants of the refuges and precepts, the verses that express spiritual commitment. You can even write your own. They can be very simple or very long and colourful, and they generally involve a number of stages, and each stage builds on the previous one in order to cultivate particular positive emotions, such as faith, such as gratitude and compassion. So to practice puja, to really practice puja, we need the qualities of both mindfulness and metta. And in fact, it's considered quite an advanced practice to conduct pujas. We do them together and we can reach a high level of consciousness, possibly more than we can reach alone. So instead of me talking about puja, we're going to actually do puja together, and I encourage you to respond and join in. I know it's all a bit strange, we're not actually together, but that doesn't mean we can't practice puja, and it doesn't mean it cannot have the same effect. In fact, I would say the atmosphere generated in a puja can be electric. So we'll practice the threefold puja now. The threefold puja. Opening reverence. We reverence the Buddha, the perfectly enlightened one.
We reverence the Buddha, the perfectly enlightened one.
The shower of the way.
The shower of the way.
We reverence the Dharma, the teaching of the Buddha.
We reverence the Dharma, the teaching of the Buddha,
which leads from darkness to light.
Which leads from darkness to light.
We reverence the Sangha, the fellowship of the Buddha's disciples.
We reverence the Sangha, the fellowship of the Buddha's disciples.
That inspires and guides.
That inspires and guides.
Offerings to the Buddha. Reverencing the Buddha, we offer flowers.
Reverencing the Buddha, we offer flowers.
Flowers that today are fresh and sweetly blooming.
Flowers that today are fresh and sweetly blooming.
Flowers that tomorrow are faded and fallen.
Flowers that tomorrow are faded and fallen.
Our bodies too, like flowers, will pass away.
Our bodies too, like flowers, will pass away.
Reverencing the Buddha, we offer candles.
Reverencing the Buddha, we offer candles.
To him who is the light, we offer light.
To him who is the light, we offer light.
From his greater lamp, a lesser lamp we light within us.
From his greater lamp, a lesser lamp we light within us.
The lamp of Bodhi, shining within our hearts.
The lamp of Bodhi, shining within our hearts.
Reverencing the Buddha, we offer incense.
Reverencing the Buddha, we offer incense.
Incense whose fragrance pervades the air.
Incense whose fragrance pervades the air.
The fragrance of the perfect life, sweeter than incense.
The fragrance of the perfect life, sweeter than incense.
Spreads in all directions throughout the world.
Spreads in all directions throughout the world.
Reverence to the three jewels. We reverence the Buddha and aspire to follow him.
We reverence the Buddha and aspire to follow him.
The Buddha was born as we are born.
The Buddha was born as we are born.
What the Buddha attained, we too can attain.
What the Buddha attained, we too can attain.
What the Buddha overcame, we too can overcome.
What the Buddha overcame, we too can overcome.
We reverence the Dharma and aspire to follow it.
We reverence the Dharma and aspire to follow it.
With body, speech and mind until the end.
with body, speech and mind until the end.
The truth in all its aspects, the path in all its stages.
The truth in all its aspects, the path in all its stages.
We aspire to study, practice, realize.
We aspire to study, practice, realize.
We reverence the Sangha and aspire to follow it.
We reverence the Sangha and aspire to follow it.
The fellowship of those who tread the way.
The fellowship of those who tread the way.
As one by one we make our own commitment.
As one by one we make our own commitment.
An ever-widening circle, the Sangha grows.
An ever-widening circle, the Sangha grows.
Well, I hope you found that as beautiful and as moving as me. And thanks to Caroline and Shtiranaga for their recording of the Shakyamuni Mantra, the Buddha, is the Buddha Shakyamuni. And I hope you enjoyed the puja and the experience. And yeah, and thank you very much for joining us on YouTube.